Good morning. I will call our May meeting of Central Oklahoma Transportation and Parking Authority to order. Don't have any items from the chairman. Do we have a citizen to be heard? Yes, sir. You'll come up and state your name, and we'll be happy to give normal 3 minutes. If you have pertinent information for the trust, okay, then we'll be happy to hear it. So,
very good.
If you state your name and address.
Certainly. David Smith, Northeast 18th and Kelly, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Been a resident now for 55 years from Norman, Oklahoma, University of Oklahoma. Mr. Chairman, I've walked nearly 1,000 miles since I made my original report here 4 months ago, and I've observed a great many things, many of them correct, many of them helpful. I've noted a number of things that have been done to help, and a few things that perhaps could be improved. I noted that the baby changing table has been replaced in the men's restroom at the bus terminal. They've changed the faucets that were having a little problem down there. However, the Route J on the north end of the terminal is marked 1, and actually the bus that utilizes that station is bus 16. I imagine it would cost about $5 to put new decals. There is no hot water at the bus terminal. Many of these people are unemployed or homeless. Even the workers who clean up the bathrooms need warm, hot water to wash their hands after they perform their duties. The concrete is crushed on the southeast corner of the terminal. The vice director and I observed that 8 weeks ago. It's still not done. There are a number of buses that follow other buses, 3 in particular. Some of them loop the Capitol even on days when the Capitol is closed. 300 steps from those covers, and they would not need to loop Route 23. The operators still do not display their IDs. I've seen a number of operators who are not very friendly to the patrons at all, especially if they're asked for their ID. I believe it's a problem. My personal opinion is that that would make a big impact on the entire Embark system simply by putting a Embark ID. Walmart has it, Kmart has it, most businesses in town show their IDs, their name. I think it promotes professionalism. This system will be receiving 27 times its annual budget in a short amount of time. Certainly we want to do everything we can to help these people that are homeless and unemployed. I believe if we can get them out to the Northeast Oklahoma City Health and Wellness Center out there, there's a man named Gary Cox who's done a wonderful job. And Larry has coordinated with that gentleman so the buses can come through there. If we're able to help those people down there at the bus terminal, they won't present a problem when they sit in a $5 million bus. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And if you have, rather than do this sometime, if you'd like to put those in actual writing to the Embark, then they'll have whatever your comments are in writing instead of trying to remember what you've said in the trust meetings. Then I think that'd be appreciated. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mm-hmm. All right. We have our minutes of our April 3rd meeting. Do I hear any changes, or do I hear approval?
Move approval. Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. We've got a good number of items on the consent docket. I think most all of them are renewal of various contracts with some of our groups, and unless any of the trustees would like discussion on any of these particular items, then I would hear a motion to approve our consent docket.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Items for individual consideration. Well, should we vote on the item F and G before we go on?
Yes.
Okay. Item F is to enter into executive session at the end of our meeting, and item G to vote on after we return from executive session. So I would have a motion to move those two items.
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Item A is consideration of approval of contract with Anglin Public Relations for public relations and marketing service. And I guess you're going to give us a brief discussion on that.
Certainly. As the item states, it was something that we brought a scope of work to you back in October for approval. We took some time to make sure that we thoroughly went through the 5 proposals that were received. We're very pleased with the quality of the proposals that were received. They were from the top agencies here in the Oklahoma City area. And after review of the 5, we then narrowed it down to 2. And we had a committee of 5 individuals, which represents the city of Oklahoma City, Zach Nash, Nicole Goodman with ADG Group, who represents the MAPS office, and we had Jennifer McClintock from the Parks and Recreation Division, Trustee Bickham, who also served on the committee, and then Megan White, who is our marketing coordinator, and myself served on that committee. Again, we met after we reviewed those proposals, and then we also had an interview with each of the top 2 candidates, which were Anglin Public Relations and Bumbershoot PR. And then after that, that's how we arrived at the recommendation, and it was a unanimous recommendation based on all of the review. And essentially what they're going to do is help us with continuing to work with the media and help us identify media opportunities with messaging regarding public transportation, parking, bike share, the river cruises, as well as help us update and ensure that we have a crisis communication plan that is adequate to meet the needs of our operation as it stands today, and looking towards the modern streetcar implementation and what types of things like could be brought along with operating rail in our community, since it's been many years since we've had that take place. We feel very confident with the recommendation, and we'd be glad to answer any questions you might have. I think Jason has a comment from Trustee Bickham that she had sent.
Yeah, thanks, Mo. Yeah, Trustee Bickham regrets, obviously, that she can't be here today, but she did want to just mention that she appreciated the opportunity to serve on the committee, was very impressed with the expertise of the committee members, and felt like the committee did an excellent job vetting all of the proposals, and as Michael said, it was a unanimous vote to award the contract.
All right. No other questions? I hear a motion to approve item A.
Move approval.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Item B is consideration of approval of purchase of a 2015 Chevrolet Silverado regular cab truck. I don't just maybe what the purpose of it is, and then we can take a vote.
Sure. This is basically just a replacement of a 2004 Ford F-150 that we use in our parking operations to haul away the refuse, and it's a vehicle that the staff uses to perform maintenance. It's kind of a companion item, actually, to I believe it was item 5C on the consent docket, where we were actually disposing of surplus property. That surplus property was this same 04 F-150 past its useful life with 110,000 miles, and so approval of this item to purchase the new truck will simply be a vehicle replacement.
All right, thank you. There a motion to approve item B?
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Item C is consideration of approval of amendment number 3 to the contract with Triad Design Group for engineer of record services, and I guess this is just an extension of our current contract with them.
Correct. This amendment will extend our current contract for 6 months. Our current contract with Triad as you are aware, who's our engineer of record. That is set to expire in June. Within the last few months, we have actually asked Triad to help us move forward some of the projects that are included in our 5-year CIP plan. One of them is task order number 22 that was approved last month, which is a sprinkler system for the South May maintenance facility. And then, if I can, I'll talk about item 6D as well on the agenda today, which is a task order for Triad 2, task order number 23. This task order is kind of a collection of projects. I would refer to them collectively as just enhancements to the South May maintenance facility. But essentially, it's adding female restrooms in our service lane where our staff actually fuel and clean the buses. We now have about a third of our technicians that are performing those job duties are now female, so certainly makes sense to expand the restroom facilities. Task order number 23 also includes the design of a paint mixing booth on the east side of our maintenance facility, so it'll be a ventilated, climate-controlled paint mixing room. And then task order number 23 that we've asked Triad to do also is looking at the north wall of our service bay. It's basically a metal wall that's over the years has been corroded and rusted, and we're looking at taking out that metal wall on the north side and replacing with more of a concrete cinder block type wall. So that's all part of task order number 23, and that relates to item 6C, the extension of the contract, and that we have Triad, they've started on these projects, so we want to make sure we have a contract through at least December so that we can complete them. And then the second part of the amendment is an increase to the contract of $55,000 to allow for the expenses associated with the design and construction management of these projects.
So, Jason, are you expecting to rebid the engineer of record services soon?
We will use the city selection process as we have in the past. And I believe we don't necessarily go out for bid. We use because the city has already went out for bid and have engineers of record. So we'll use the city's process to select our engineer of record.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Then, no other questions. I'd have a motion to approve items C and D.
Move the items.
All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Item E is consideration of approval to amend the fiscal year 2015 operating budget. I think Jason's got a few brief comments on that.
Yeah, on the amendment to the budget, on the attachment, if you'll look at page 2 of the attachment, the heading there on that worksheet is Cotpa Transit Amended Operating Budget FY 2015. And essentially, this is a amendment to the FY 15 operating budget that really includes two pieces of our operations, the transit operation and the river operation. And so I wanted to talk first about the transit amendment. Essentially, this is a amendment to reduce the operating expenditures by $520,000 for the fiscal year, and that's due to savings that we've realized in our operating budget, and it essentially allows us to align our budget to what we anticipate our expenses to be through 9 months of the fiscal year. That reduction in expenditures will be offset by, or I should say balanced, with reductions in federal grant revenue of $430,000 and a reduction of the payment from the general fund to support transit of $90,000. Part 2 of the budget amendment is for the river operations. And on that $90,000 of reduction on the general fund payment on the transit side of our operations, you'll notice on the next page when you look at the river cruises budget, we're actually increasing the transfer from the general fund by $90,000 in river operations. So we're essentially reallocating that general fund payment, $90,000 worth, from transit because of the savings we've seen in transit over to the river. That $90,000 will then in turn support higher than anticipated costs with the HMS contract. That's the firm that we use to maintain and run the boats along the Oklahoma River. I'll be glad to answer any other questions about the amendment.
Oh, I think probably you've explained in more detail to each trustee so that we've got a better understanding of it. So
Right.
Unless there's any other questions, I would have a motion to approve item E. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Next item is our ratification of payroll and vendor claims for the period April 1st through April 30th. Unless there's any question of any of the trustees, then I would have a motion to ratify. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Next item is receive our financial reports, budget to actual for the 9 months ended March 31st. Jason?
Yes, looking at our financial reports, I'd like to begin on page 2. I do have a few comments that I think will be of interest to the trustees. On page 2, we're looking at our transportation operations, and then as we do monthly, then we'll take a look at our parking operations and our river operations. So beginning with our transportation operations, I'll just point out our total operating revenues. That bottom line in the operating revenue section is essentially $20,133 above what we had projected or what we had budgeted at this point in time during the year. So essentially, we're right on track in terms of overall revenues, but there are a couple of different categories I'd like to share some information about. One is looking at our passenger revenue. We continue to be above target, $83,207 above target on our operating revenues, or 104% of our budget, and that's very consistent with where we were last month when we looked at our February financials. We were actually at about 103.5%. So that trend continues in that our passenger revenue is exceeding budget. The next line there is the federal grant revenue, and again, we talked about this when we looked at our February financials, and our budget amendment that we just approved will essentially help us align the revenues we actually receive from reimbursements and put in our operating budget. Will actually help align those to the new amended budget. And then the other item I would mention is the state government subsidy. You'll notice that it's actually $333,000 over budget, and that's due just to the timing of the payment that we received from the state. When we built our budget, we obviously had that program to receive later in the year, and we actually received it in March. On the operating expenditure side, we continue to see savings in our personnel costs, about 92% of expected budget. Last month we were at 91%. And again, just as a reminder, it was actually in March that the trustees approved part of the new labor agreement, which granted a 1.5% cost of living increase. And so that cost of living increase was actually reflected in our finances kind of the second half of March as we processed and implemented that with our payroll system. So as we begin getting into April and May, I think we would certainly see that gap between budget start to close a little bit more. And then the other thing I would point out on operating expenditures is just, again, talking about our supply budget. You'll notice we're at about 76% of budget. We have about $367,000 that we've saved so far in fuel due to decline in fuel prices. So that's what's driving a good part of that savings. With that, I'll be glad to answer any questions about the transportation budget or move on. Budget to actuals.
Questions, just move on to that.
Okay, so looking at the parking budget on page 3, again, looking at the revenues, starting with parking revenues, you'll notice that we are at 98% of budget, or just $117,000 under what our projection was. And what I'll mention there is that when we looked at these numbers through February, we're at 89% of our budget. So even with the delay in the Arts District Garage opening, the Century Center taking a couple more months to open than what we had anticipated when we developed our budget, parking revenues are they're beginning to close that gap between what we had expected to receive versus what we've actually received in terms of parking revenue. On the expenditure side of things, everything, as you can see, is pretty much in line with where we would anticipate to be at this point in time in the year. And then the only other thing I would point out on parking is following down on your report below the debt service category, you'll see a line there in bold, total excess of revenue over expenditures. And through 9 months of the fiscal year, even after paying debt service, our total excess of revenues over expenditures is $842,000. That's up from last month when we were at about $755,000. So that number is certainly headed in the right direction. And then on the river financials, the operating revenue is essentially the same as what we looked at in February, keeping in mind we didn't have any service, or we suspended our service, of course, in February and March, so revenue is essentially the same. The one thing that has changed is the actual expenditures for other services and fees, and the actuals versus budget. We're actually now, after reconciling the contract with HMS, at 115% of the budget, or you can see about $92,000 over on our expenditures, and we approved a budget amendment today to help offset that. And with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions on the financials.
All right. Any questions? Surely all our brilliant accounting financial people have no. Okay, thank you. All right. Well, then I hear a motion to receive our financial reports.
So moved.
Second? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Our program reports. First is our transit system report.
Mr. Chairman, trustees, good morning. Thanks for having us. I'd like to touch on 4 topics of the March 2015 transit report: safety, ridership, new night service, and on-time performance. We experienced 4 non-preventable accidents in March 2015 and 2 preventable accidents, which were both the result of poor turning practice. In one case, we made too wide of a left and encountered a parked car. In another case, we went through a tight space at Bass Pro Shop and encountered the rocks with the back of the bus. Needless to say, we've conducted some turning practices, and I can tell you that driving those buses around the city is a very difficult challenge for our drivers, but they accept that. Our 3-month rolling average for preventable accidents is 1.33 accidents per month. Now, ridership, if you do me a favor and look at the presentation, you'll see that we had 10,762 passengers transported per day in March of, goodness, that says April through February. I'm sorry, that might be through March. But we had 10,762 compared to 9,853 daily ridership, which is an increase of 9.23%. And it's in keeping with, we had 140 additional passengers each day in March compared to February, which is between February and January, we were up 148, so we're in line with that. The average Saturday ridership for March in our system was 4,901 passengers, which is 20% up compared to the 4,078 passengers. I'm pleased to tell you that our downtown Discovery Saturday ridership was up from 260 passengers compared to 288 passengers in the previous March. But I'm pleased to report that the number of passengers is up 48% from February, where we were under 34%. So we've made that up on Saturday ridership. We're going to describe, instead of night service, Jason and I decided last night to call it new night service because we're focusing primarily on the new night service, which was originated the last 5 days in January, and excluding the Discovery night service, which has been in existence for 16 years. And the new night service is the, as you I'm sure know, Route 23 and Route 11, which the 4 buses run at night. And I'm very pleased to report that we provided service in March of 2015 to 3,053 passengers compared to 2,289 the previous month, which is a 33% increase in a service that is most needed. Another way to view that is that we transported 139 passengers per night on the new night service compared to 114 passengers the previous night, or the previous month, which is an increase of 22%. Our on-time performance for March 2015 was 70.3%, which is 14% above when we started measuring it in May, and 2% below the previous month. Part of that is attributed to 4 bad weather days, but we're not hiding behind that. We've identified that we can, in some cases, we arrive less than or more than 1 minute early, which is something that that is negatively impacting our service. If we're 2 minutes early, we are out of service, and that is something that we can correct. And frankly, I'm speaking to some drivers. It's very difficult for them to rein in their tendency at night to want to get their passengers where they're going, but they've recommitted that at least we can eliminate that part of arriving 2 minutes early and getting a falling out of that night service or that on-time performance. We're deeply committed. I keep that 73% of our passengers that was revealed in the customer satisfaction survey of July. It's just imprinted in my mind in terms of those people are absolutely dependent upon us to be on time. With that, I'd be pleased to answer any questions or provide additional information.
Any questions? All right.
Thank you very much.
Wait, I have a question on the link service. Do you see that that's improving since you realigned the routes? You also did that at the end of January?
That's right. And you'll notice the February is kind of the first uptick in link ridership that we've seen in many months. And you're right, it correlates with when we launched the new night service and added the additional stops to the link service. So,
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Long-range plan and Larry?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, compared to last time, just be very brief. Just 2 things to mention is on this Northwest Rapid Transit Corridor concept planning that we're doing, what we're going to do is focus more on the multimodal aspects of that. Definitely if you're trying to add transit to Classen and the Northwest Expressway, that's important, and we know that passengers and cyclists need to be able to get to that corridor and across to the other side so they can take transit in the direction that they, in the direction to go back on their return trip. So that's an important thing, but also that prospect of trying to look at the concepts of park and ride along there adds, the dimension of how that corridor really does have a lot to do with what motorists might do as well. And then there are other things that that'll be a part of that conceptual work that really make it more truly multimodal than just transit. We always knew that it would get into that, but we're going to put more of a focus on that. The only other thing that I want to mention is I had a chance this month to go to Seattle for a planning conference, but while there, had a chance to meet with a few transit officials in that city. And one of them was their streetcar operations manager. Seattle has actually bought the Enacon vehicles, same manufacturer that Oklahoma City has selected. And they're basically opening up their second streetcar maintenance facility. The first one they put in 7 or 8 years ago was much smaller. This one, I think, has some lessons learned that was good, and got some good pictures, and it was a good peer contact for us to make. And similarly, Seattle has a pretty extensive system, really basically a BRT, bus rapid transit system, and had a chance to meet with their chief planner that's been involved in that. And even though it's now fully built out, there's 5 routes, again, a lot of good lessons learned and some good information that we could benefit from. So that's just kind of it, short and sweet.
There's modern streetcars, are they? Kind of tell us a little more about that.
Okay.
I'm just curious.
Yeah. Well, kind of a long story short, back about 2008 or so, they opened up a relatively short line, about 1.25 miles out from downtown to something called Lake Union, which is where a lot of the high-tech companies have some headquarters, and then back. And it was basically built into an area where they were trying to spark more job creation, job development, and that ridership has increased considerably. Well, Seattle, they have a wide range of transit, but, they also realized a need to try to have a streetcar to the east of the downtown for something they call the First Hill line, which basically would run from a little bit north of the stadium area, the what's called Chinatown or Pioneer Square area, over to the Capitol Hill area. And they've got the stops in, the tracks and everything. They're still trying to get operational, but the two systems don't connect. In fact, they won't until they do a third line, maybe another 5 or 10 years from now. But they have considerable experience in operating and managing streetcar systems, and so they're a useful peer for us to stay in touch with.
Are they on wire, or how are they operating?
Well, okay. Seattle Lake Union entirely on wire. The other one, the one that goes out to Capitol Hill, is for the most part on wire, but not entirely. And in fact, in their shop area, especially, no wires whatsoever. But so they're also going to be using some of the, what you might call the hybrid aspects of streetcar.
And the maintenance of those vehicles, did you visit with them at all about that, or?
Yes, we did, and that's some information that I've had a chance to share some with Jason. And long story short, the design of the second maintenance facility is quite different than the second one, again, due to some lessons learned, and yet they would have done things a little differently there. And so, that sort of thing is, we're lucky to have, really good consultants on our project, but, the peer review that we've been talking about with APTA should just help us come up with an even better plan.
But have they been pretty maintenance-free, or have they had mechanical problems? I mean, that's what I'm curious about.
The second line has not yet gone into operation. The vehicles are still being fabricated. They were just able to get all the track work and the electrification and all that in well ahead of actually starting operation. So we don't know yet.
Okay. All righty. Thank you. Parking system.
Good morning.
Good morning.
As you see in your report, just kind of briefly go over, you'll see a $450,000 increase in the event revenue from last month. That is due to our payment from the Thunder for suite parking, and which also increased our operating revenue. And then looking on down at the occupancy, I just kind of want to point it out. You see it went down when we opened up the Arts District, and now we're slowly moving back up. We hit 100% for like 2 months, but now we're back up to 110. So just brief updates on some of the construction projects. The Santa Fe elevators are on target, as well to be expected for a 40-year-old facility. We are running into some issues, but we'll probably be bringing some more information to you as that comes. And it's mostly just moving electrical and different things like that in the pits that we were not able to see until the elevators were actually out. So it's just some work.
Debbie, I heard there was a fire in one of the elevators at the Santa Fe?
It was a lobby, and it was a heater, and it's
Okay.
already been taken care of.
So it wasn't in the elevator?
No, it was in the lobby area. And then Century Center, of course, that's been finished now. We're working on just replacing some signage for like the hotel areas, directing the people over and kind of working with the developer and the hotel on that. The Sheridan Walker project, they're about 50% finished on the top deck. We did have them kind of hold off during the Arts Festival, so that we could utilize that top floor for parking. They should be finishing that up probably within the next week or so. In the Arts District, the retail build-out has started. They're working on some plumbing, probably be pouring concrete in the next week or so. And also, I just wanted to mention, if you had parked in the Arts District today, you saw the new busy lockers. We've got them now in all of our facilities, and they've been a great amenity to our parkers. They really seem to appreciate them and like them. So that was real short and sweet today. So, any questions?
So the graffiti problem on the Sheridan Walker garage, is that remediated?
That was cleaned up yesterday or Tuesday. So.
All right. Any other
Any
questions?
hint of suspects in that?
No, we don't. No, and places, but they've taken the police report, and so.
All right. Thank you. Our marketing, customer relations, and technology.
We have had a busy month with our media, including the graffiti. Debbie did a good job in responding to them. We want to mention that we had Channel 4 out doing quite a few interviews on the morning of Earth Day. We had a very good list of partners as well who helped serve in interviews. That would be the executive director from the Oklahoma chapter of the American Lung Association, as well as T.O. Bowman, who is the sustainability director here at Oklahoma City, the city of Oklahoma City, myself, and then we also had Jane Jenkins from Downtown Inc. She provided some information for us to use to give to the media, as well as Roy Williams with the Oklahoma City Chamber. And most of that is in light of, we use Earth Day to kick off our ozone awareness campaign, which starts with our first Third Friday Free, which is on May 15th. But most recently, a State of the Air report was issued regarding the rankings of air quality among major cities across the U.S. And alarmingly, we are rated as 15th worst air in the country. So there's worse out there, but what we want to do through our campaign is encourage us to do better, and one way that can be done is the use of public transportation. The American Lung Association, its local chapter, again, he is committed to partnering with us in order to convey public transportation as an option for improving air quality in our city, in our area. And it's actually the state, I should say, I'm sorry, not Oklahoma City, but as a state as a whole, and they do break down cities. And that is one of the things that there will be quite a bit of information on provided just by that entity itself. But we will integrate as part of our campaign. We also have several photo shoots lined up. We've got to tell our story, and one way to do that is through imagery, using photography to display our night service, how it can be used, the various ways it can be used, and the customers who use it, as well as the very nice brand new amenities that we have at our bus stops, which is the new shelters. If you've not seen one, I encourage you to definitely make your way by one, and we can provide you with those addresses. We are hearing very nice feedback already on those and requests for more. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
The last paragraph on in our report, efforts are underway to photograph, create, print, and distribute more than 200 employee badges for the new access control points for the security system, all of our facilities. Is that one of the questions this gentleman had about drivers not identifying or not having badges? Will that
Well, those cards
answer
are
that
necessary
question,
to access the buildings themselves.
I see.
I believe that is, the display of those onboard buses, Jason can chime in, but I believe that's a union negotiated item as well, that, we have to work out with both the union and just a policy perspective.
Yes, so at this point, all employees will be issued an ID badge, and then the operators will have, it'll be, at this point, their discretion whether or not they want to wear it, showing it visible, or if they just carry it in their pocket for access to and from the facilities. There are some, some operators that would probably prefer to display their operator ID rather than their name in some cases. If we decided that, okay, we're going to have our operators identify themselves on each bus, like Michael said, we'd have to work with the ATU a little bit on how we would want to accomplish that, but at this point it's still optional. But they do have the name badges now that they could display, still at their discretion.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Thank you. River cruises. Getting your time of the year now, so.
Good morning.
Morning.
As the chairman stated, we are in full swing. We started in April, just operating weekends only. April is kind of a low ridership month, so we cut it back to weekends only to increase our riders per service hour and cut down on those expenses. And as a result, we were up about 60% riders per service hour in the first 3 weeks. It dropped off a little bit for the last 2 weekends, but it's still 35% above what it was in the prior year. Another issue we had, the first 2 weekends of April, we had limited service due to that heavy rainfall, a significant amount of debris collected around the May lock, and we were unable to use that lock for those first 2 weeks. But Public Works quickly cleared that off, and we're back in full swing. So starting today, we're back to 5 days a week in service. Our very fun attractions, Mother's Day's this month. Next weekend, Mothers Ride Free. In June, the weekend of Father's Day, Dads will ride free. History Comes Alive starts next Saturday. This will be the 8th year that the Oklahoma History Center has provided historical reenactors for us for that service. It's a very popular service. This year, instead of running it from Exchange to Regatta and back, we're going to run it to Meridian and back to try and boost some of that ridership at the Meridian end of the river. A lot of our expenses deal with these cocktail cruises, these themed cocktail cruises. So we're moving them from specialty cruises into evening ferry service. It will be the same sort of system. They will not have the hot hors d'oeuvres, but they will have the same music and party atmosphere with the themes, and being on ferry service should boost ridership there and help us control some of those expenses associated with specialty cruises. We will still offer sunset cruises, cutting back from 4 to 8 times a month down to only twice a month. Those are very good sellers. We should be able to continue to sell those through. And of course, we have to do Haunt the River because we get demand for that as early as August. In 2014, we began participating in the Road Scholar program that Embark offers. We've had a couple of groups come out last year, and we're promoting it a little bit heavier this year since it was quite successful. The students learn about passenger ferries in general, which a lot of kids in Oklahoma probably don't know anything about. They learn about locks and dams and the correlation of our system to the Panama Canal. They learn about the development of our river and our river wildlife. The media plan is scheduled and is in progress. We've hit 4 different types of formats in the radio advertising. Of course, we do the internet radio and social media. We're also participating this year in the CVB Premium Rack brochure. Other ways that we promote the service through marketing, of course, our brochures, which you've all received, website updates, social media, and then HMS, their marketing person, maintains consistent contact with hoteliers, both in Bricktown and at the Meridian, Aero Meridian corridor, to help promote riders in that. And that ridership is beginning to grow as those hotels are beginning to fill up and become more used, and they become more aware of our service. On May 8th, Discover Oklahoma will be out. The last time they were out and did a video for us, they did one in July of 2011 and one in July of 2012. So we're very happy to have them come out and refresh those videos that are available at discoveroklahomatv.com and are shown on KFOR TV. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions about the river.
How have you been kind of monitoring the transfers from the Bricktown, from Bricktown to the boats? I mean, are we getting usage there, or?
A lot of the traffic we get from Bricktown are people who just walk the trail. We do have water taxi vans on board that we can sell patrons if they're interested. This, I think, will be the first year we'll really have an opportunity to see if that is a viable offering. But we do have them on board in case people are interested. I believe we've sold a couple, but not very many.
But I mean, to me, we ought to be marketing that at the hotel area on the Meridian area, because those people can then transfer and go up in through Bricktown, and
right, and
more so than people in Bricktown wanting to ride the boats down and back around. But
yes, HMS has done a good job creating some signage down in that area, down in the Bricktown area, and up in the hotels to make people aware that this is really the best way to get down to that area. It's more relaxing, it's less expensive than a taxi. And now that we have later service on the weekends, and they'll be able to stay down in the Bricktown area till as late as, I believe it's about 9, 10 o'clock in the evening. So they can get down there and spend either a 4-hour day or an 8-hour day down there in that area. We also frequently speak with the Boathouse District folks, and we're gearing up for next year when the Whitewater Center will be in action, and making sure we're going to do some cross-promoting with them for that venue as well.
okay, good. All right. Any other questions?
I will note that for Spokies next month, we should have our new rebranded Spokey system to show you. We'll show you the new bike and some of our new branding materials at that time.
All right. Thank you. All right. Do I hear a motion to receive our program reports? All in favor? Opposed? All right. I guess we voted to go into executive, so we can go into...
We need to take a roll call vote to go into executive session.
All right. Yes? Yes. All right. Thank you. Not for us, yeah. All right, do I hear a motion to approve item G?
I don't think so. I'd second the motion.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, any items from any of the trustees? Nope. I might make a brief mention. Jason asked me prior to the meeting that maybe at some point this summer we have a workshop meeting for the trust, and my suggestion, one of the ideas on the workshop is all the staff and all the trustees come up with 5 either long-range plans or projects or whatever you think is coming up in the next few years, so that we can kind of revitalize our long-range plan, which is kind of just sat there and hadn't been much, but get all the staff's involvement in what they think the 5 items ought to be for Cotpa and all the trustees, and then if we do have maybe a half-day workshop or something, then we can bring all that together and kind of go from there. So you might be giving that some thought. All right, we're adjourned.